You have a very interesting license structure in terms of, in order to be a builder, you need to have a license. You need to prove that you're actually competent in what you're doing. We don't have that system. So, I can register tomorrow a construction company, and there you go. As long as I find clients, I'm trading.
Today on the Curious Builder podcast, we had Julia Starzyk on from Star Projects London. And Julia is our first guest from overseas. So it was really fun to talk and contrast some of the differences in style to businesses and construction in America, as well as what her experience is in the UK. So without further ado, here is Julia Starzyk. All right, welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today we are joined by a very special guest, our first international guest all the way across the pond in the UK. We've got Julia Starzyk from Star Projects London. Welcome, Julia.
Well, hello. Is it morning, afternoon?
Yeah, I was excited. So my daughter, she's 9, she's sick this morning, and so I brought her into the studio. It's 8:30 a.m. our time. And it's obviously early afternoon, I would assume your time. And I told my daughter, because she does the podcast stuff with me, we do some kid stuff together. And she goes, "Oh, you have a guest coming in from the UK?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, what time does her flight come?" I'm like, "Oh, no. She's not flying here." I was very flattered that she thought you were flying here. But anyway, I thought that was kind of amusing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've never been to the States yet.
Oh, okay. How did you hear about the Curious Builder out of curiosity?
I think there was one of these episodes back in the day that you posted that I found quite an interesting one. It was going about, oh God, I think it was talking about like personal branding and builders and how they market themselves and stuff. And obviously, I have a bit of a builder's background as well. I used to be a commercial director in a construction company down here for 7 years. So I picked up on a lot of the points there, and I found it really fascinating how different it is down here as well.
Yeah, that's so funny. Down here, I like that because we would refer to Minnesota like over there. That's it. Anyway, essentially, you do client representation, which we do have here, especially in the higher end homes. My friend Brad down in Arizona, he runs into that a lot because their vacation homes or clients aren't there. But I'd love to contrast and compare the type of clientele that you work with, what similarities are between the US market and obviously the UK market. I really know nothing about building overseas, a little bit in Europe, just because I've traveled there a little bit and I've had some other podcast builder friends of mine that have been there and I've heard them talk about it. So that'd just find it really interesting to hear your perspective with your clients. So why don't you give us a little intro about basically how you got into your job? Sounds like you're in construction prior to what you're doing now, and tell us a little bit about what your services are now and how you work with your clients.
So funny enough, my business, I've set up my business 5 years ago. It's going to be 5 in July. I never really planned on starting my own business, but it was the big boom of COVID back then. And for various reasons, I used to work for a construction company. I used to do a lot of operations, and what my official title was commercial director. But I was always involved in like the project management and cost management and making sure we're making money and making profits. I was going in a bit of a different direction where I really wanted to work with private clients. And I found this issue that a lot of the homeowners and people who are doing their own homes for their own benefits, they don't really understand what it is they're actually getting themselves into. And London market is very specific in terms of we have a lot of high value projects. And what I mean by high value, it's probably around 500,000 and plus, let alone that these days £1 million doesn't really buy you much in building works. So it takes a lot of work to have £1 million available in your bank account. And those people tend to be very good in something, whatever it is they're doing, whether it's finance, accountancy, lawyers, whoever. They're not necessarily good in understanding the construction processes in the same way. And quite often they have absolutely zero desire of learning those processes. They just want to hand over the keys, make sure everything is done to what they expect at the end, and that's it, be done with it. And as far as I believe in US, this is usually dealt by the contractor, as far as I understand. And they've got their own project managers, they have their own QSs or cost managers. In here, we have two sides. So we always say there's a contractor's side and there's the client side as well. You need to make sure both of them are benefiting from whatever it is that is being delivered. And yeah, I've started to shift from working on that contractor side back onto the client side. And then probably about a couple of years in, I've realized that I actually miss the construction sites and working with the builders and getting that insight from sides of what's happening, what's actually happening on the market, what are the live issues and the world going. I decided to restructure the business a little bit, and we now have those two arms, which is pretty much what I just said. One of the arms is the client side that I run, and it's always going to be just me, perhaps one more person that we can replace each other when needed. And the other arm is the contractor's arm. And we tend to narrow those services quite significantly in terms of we support contractors with tendering, which is bidding for work, getting the price together, putting together a plan of how they foresee the project being done, as well as any, I call it emergency works. So let's say the project is starting to go sour because something's happened, something failed, someone's running out of money, something's overrunning. We tend to step in, shake the team a little bit, help out in terms of organizing a way forward, and then we leave them to it.
So a couple questions here. One is when the first of all, I think it's a really a credit to because you're right, a lot to the homeowners that hire you from the get-go, because realizing that you're not good at everything is probably the first step either in humility or services, and both are fine. Both would actually be welcome. I'd love it if we had a humble client enough to realize that, hey, this isn't something I either want to do or have the skill set to do. And you're right. I've been in client situations where it would have been nice to have a client representative because sometimes a client, when they don't have the knowledge, and let's say we'll pick on the lawyer field. The example I have is not a lawyer. Their gloves go on and they try to pick a fight because they feel like if they don't show strength, that they're showing weakness to, let's say, an adversary. But as a builder who I've been doing this for 2 decades, we want to create a win-win scenario. And so the goal sometimes is to remind the client that, hey, we're on your team. We're trying to get this. Should not be an adversarial relationship. And I talk all the time about how important relationships are. And it doesn't mean that there's not troubled waters. It doesn't mean that there's not difficult times, but you do both have to respect each other to get through it. But then there's the time aspect. Some people are just like really busy. They're like, I just don't want to we have a client right now, and they're delightful people, but basically she just wants a turnkey home. And which is fine. We could certainly deliver that. And I think the size of the project sometimes is daunting to people because they're like, oh man, this is 6 months in design, a year or two building. It's just easier to go buy something. And so like sometimes you have to navigate why do they want to do this? And to make it easier, sometimes I've only worked on one project with a client rep, and it went great because there was a couple times the homeowner was a business owner. And it's kind of like this old adage that when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. And so he was looking at me like I was a nail. And I said, no, 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 no. And actually the owner's rep several times came sort of to my defense and said, no, this is actually what the builder's telling you is accurate and right. And is the best situation for you. And because they trusted, in this case, you, Julia, it made the project go much, much, much better. And I think where sometimes you get into trouble, like if a builder feels threatened, I think you first of all have to be confident in what you do. But if people are asking questions to seek knowledge, I think it's fine. If you're asking questions to sow doubt, like that's a totally different avenue. And like I can see how that would be a very tricky team chemistry to sort of navigate. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my perspective on.
I couldn't agree more. Interestingly, I find Americans very easy people to work with because your culture is very different to the British culture. So down here, and it happens with all the trades, even project managers, builders, client reps, everybody. There's a lot of these meetings that are around meetings. The meetings that could be an email, I call them. You hear those sentences, we're going to need the answer from you soon. And then a regular person, how do you define in a number a word soon? It can be a couple of days, it can be a couple of weeks, it can be a couple of months, right? It's very hard to actually put a date and stamp on it. And then often people who buy houses and then refurb them, they don't understand the priorities because they don't understand the process. So they can't really, logically place where exactly, that information has to be decided on. I'm going to
So
be honest.
let's dive into the culture thing. So I would almost term that as passive aggressive. Like they don't bring clarity. Like people are just saying, hey, everyone says soon, but nobody can quantify what soon is. And then you say, no, we need an actual date. Is this, and you basically come off basically a little bit more forward, I guess. And you would say, no, we have 2 weeks to decide this. Are you, who's asking about this timing? The builders telling the client they need timing, or the designers, or who's the one kind of leading the ship here?
It varies, to be fair. I specialize in projects that are over budget and already delayed. So then
So they're
something,
bringing you on when things have already gone bad.
yeah. So pretty much then they call me and there's a fire everywhere and everybody's starting to put the little smokes and stuff. And then I go, ah, and pick up on the bits that are hugely important on many levels. And I'm unfortunately not 100% British. I've been in the UK for 15 years, but I was born in Poland. So my thinking process is very much down to earth and strategic in a way that I don't really accept soon as an answer. So I even have a client right now where we've got a full design team. We've got deadlines for them to deliver their pieces of information. We know that some of those are delayed. Um, but we're missing those key milestones in terms of when are we choosing the contractor, when are we going to grant the work, when is the work going to start, like literally just noting down these dates so everybody can get their head around in terms of how does it actually align with everybody's deliverables.
I think on your website it said you've had about over 100 clients. Is that accurate? Or is that 100 projects you've been on?
There's been 100 projects I've worked on and completed, probably more than that now. Some of the projects were with the same client. I would have to count the clients,
That's so my question is this: how many, let's just call it 150, whatever the number is, it doesn't matter. But what percentage of the projects have you starting from day one? So you're part of assembling the architect, the interior designer, and the builder. And how often are you coming in after construction has already begun?
I've that's a big jump there. So I don't think I've ever came on board where the design team was being assembled. Usually the clients here, they pick a designer first. So whether it's the architect or interior designer, they already went with someone visually approved by them. And then essentially what tends to happen is the team is being collated from there, and at some point they make that decision whether they want to go the client rep side or they want to do it themselves. But yeah, I've never really done like a project from scratch where the team was being assembled. We've got something like a planning process here, which means you have to ask the council for a permission to do whatever work you want to do.
Every single time on every project?
Yeah.
And how long does that process take?
Like every single one. It's mainly if you're planning major works to anything or alterations visible from outside, or if it's to historically relevant properties which could be listed or within conservation areas. If you refurbishing your own flat, you don't have to do that. But London is quite an old city altogether, so a lot of properties are either listed or within conservation areas.
And yeah, and that makes sense. Historical preservation, I get why they would want to do that. Out of curiosity, how much of what is the building scene like in terms of building new homes versus remodeling? I would imagine in London proper, like any city, it's probably mostly renovation. And then is there new developments, or is there new building and tear downs outside in the suburbs, or is tear downs and rebuilding not really a thing in England?
In England, in general, new builds are quite common, and we call it self builds as well. So essentially, it's the clients who have the money, they buy the land, and then they outsource the packages to various contractors, subcontractors to deal with. That's called self build. New build properties in general, whether it's on the suburbs, whether it's outside of London, whether it's North England, wherever, that's quite common. Developers work in terms of big developer coming onto a site and building 300 properties. That's also quite common. It's not so common in London per se. Now the areas are expanding massively with loads of developments happening as well. But strictly like the prime central, from the typical Joe blogs from zone one, London is divided into zones. So like the strict central area is zone one, then you've got zone two, probably the less precious areas, if we call it, zone three, four, etc. I think there's up to seven of them. So essentially, somebody who just bought a house in central London, it's probably going to be either renovation, alteration, maybe basement extension, maybe like a kitchen extension, a loft, some sort of add-on, something. Everybody's scrambling for space here, always. The more they can gain from it, the better. But typically, it's some form of existing building being in place or part of an existing building being
Yep.
in place. Like sometimes we have to keep a facade of the building and then everything else is built new. And then essentially that's what happens there.
Go drilling back on the business platform, how did you know that there was a need for this? Because it's a little different than what I see here. The client representatives that I see here, it seems like they start in the very beginning. Like in my situation that I've worked with one individual, the client that we ended up building for, they did the architecture work themselves. They had the land and they designed the home and then they bid it out with two builders. I was one of them. We were awarded the project. And then a big part of it was just everything we do is cost plus, just open book. You see all the bills and it's really just going through that. And the project coordinator, or sorry, the client representative is saying, hey, that looks high, that looks low, that seems like a good deal. And it's really, they'll ask those questions just so that the builder, because it's not, or sorry, the client, they don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what lumber should be. Should it be 300,000? Should it be 200,000? Was tile 30 grand, 500 grand? They don't know because they're not used to seeing it every day. And I think a good project or client representative can actually bring a lot of value to the project. But I think sometimes builders might feel threatened by it. But honestly, I think it's a good thing, especially if that client empowers them to help make decisions. And so the cooks in the kitchen, we want to make sure that the meal is served really good. Sometimes you might break some eggs in the back. When you serve your dinner, it's a very nice presentation. And so I think it can lead to a better experience for the client, but a lot of it is client driven. And so in your case, so they're starting here. I've not heard of a situation, not that it doesn't exist, where people come on later, but you're almost like a firefighter. They're calling you, Julia, because something has gone wrong. You're over budget by 20, 30, 40% or whatever. So walk us through, like, how did you start your business? How did you know it was going to be in demand, and how do clients find you? Let's walk through the how you acquire clients.
Usually, when I get appointed, there's no builder on the scene. So we have a very different contracting method. Cost plus is becoming more and more popular, but it's still more on a basis of there's a whole team. The client gets a lot of certainty in terms of what the final figure is going to be or where they would like the figure to be. And when I say a project team, we have a bit of a different team here. So it would be an architect or someone dealing with the actual shell of the building, if you like. We might have an interior designer who's going to deal with everything, all of the finishes and all of that stuff. Then we tend to have structural engineers. They do all of the beams, calculations, foundations, all of that fun stuff. And then we tend to have people like project managers who are independent project managers working out how do we actually get this project forward. Because we have that process of planning that tends to be quite a lot of time from the actual, okay, we're ready to for the project to start, but we just need permissions for it. And that planning process, at best, it can be 8 weeks, and some councils it can be 12 weeks. I've got a project now that's been back and forward in planning for a year now, so it all varies hugely.
And so you're basically coordinating all this between all the different parties. Are you presenting to the city, or what is your involvement?
So essentially, everybody from that team has some form of responsibility, right? And if you
Mhm.
now imagine Joe Bloggs walking into that room, there's probably 10 people around, and he doesn't really understand what these people are supposed to be doing. My job is to actually make sure that we've got everything we need to have covered and make sure that it's actually delivered to the standard so that we can do the work, that the aims of the project, we call it brief of the project, is met. Whether it's on brief can be on any standards, it can be sustainability standards, it could be financially making as much profit as possible, it could be the highest quality possible. There's loads of aims people can have within the brief. And we kind of plonk ideas into that mix as well and challenge all of the, whether it's the architects or QSs. We try to always optimize the cost to be as comfortable for everybody in the room. There's loads of things or opportunities for us to chip in. But the way I always explain it within my niche, because I don't really tend to work with developers much, I don't really work within commercial projects at all. I mainly focus on working with private clients, doing their own homes, and having those priorities there to make it as easy as comfortable for them to live in. I always Everybody gets excited about paint colors and wallpapers and picking and choosing furniture and bathroom tiles and those things. But nobody wants to talk about pouring concrete or doing the brickwork and choosing windows. Somehow these are not fun things for people. So what I tend to do for many clients is essentially we guide them through this process in terms of how precious are you about these things? Would you like me to make your decisions for you because you don't want to waste time or care? Or would you like to be involved in picking the actual brick we're going to use? Would you like to be involved in terms of this, that, and the other? There's usually something we call VE exercise, which means value engineering.
Oh yeah, it's every builder's least favorite acronym.
We tend to not get builders involved in the whole value engineering process yet. We usually do this with the actual project team.
If you don't have the builders involved, how are you figuring out, how are you verifying pricing?
So that's what the QSs do. So we've got this profession of a quantity surveyor, and they're essentially cost consultants. It's the people who put together a full cost plan and cost report, and they price up based on the market movements and everything that happens, how much the project should cost.
When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation. So you've got a lot of front side professionals. It seems heavier than here. It's not that. So when we build let's just call it our homes are more expensive. It doesn't really matter. So let's just call it $1 million or £2 million pounds, I guess, in this situation. You've got architecture fees, which are, I'd love to hear some percentages on let's just say on a $2 million project. I would expect architecture fees to be somewhere between 6 and 10%. Is that similar to you?
It depends what is the project. If we're
Yeah,
saying,
that's a good point. I'm thinking new homes in this situation. So yeah, that might be difficult.
no, so that's probably 10%, I would say, is probably going to be there or thereabouts. If we're saying about a listed property with however much of history and whatever alterations and let's say negotiation with the English heritage in terms of what we can and can't do, it's probably going to be more towards 15, 20. Like I
For the architect? Wow. What about interior design? Is that usually captured within the same architecture firm, or is usually the interior designer a complete separate company?
they're usually a completely separate
Yep.
company. And I can't tell you their fees because it's like comparing art. People
Yeah.
have so many
Yeah, I
different
agree.
options and choices. It's
Most of them here do hourly. I mean, are your architects and designers actually doing a fixed percentage, or are they just guiding you saying, hey, we think we're going to be between 18 and 20%, but we're charging you 200 or 300 or 400 pounds an hour? How do they actually charge for their services?
So you'll be surprised, but most of the people actually charge a fixed fee,
Oh,
regardless of the
really? No
value. So
way.
they will give you a quote.
But
We've got
what's it based on? Is it based on time? Is it based on what is it based on?
so what we've got here for well, let's do it on an architect's example. So we've got something called RIBA, which is the Royal Institute of British Architects, and they publish however often every 3 years or something called stages of work of building works, and stage 1 is brief, stage 2 is whatever it might be, the initial concept or a design. Stage three, yeah, stage three is design development. Stage four is tender. So they price per stages.
So this institute is coming up with their fee structure. So all architects charge the same amount?
No, they don't charge the same amount, but they charge based on the structure.
I
So
see.
if you say stage one, which is the brief, that includes initial set of drawings with initial ideas. It might have some pictures of what the property could
So
look
it's
like.
so they've defined the spec so that all if you have 3 architects bidding and they're doing just phase 1, then they're all bidding at least the same thing is included, so that's transparent. But I could be, let's call it 40,000 and the other architect could be 35,000 for the same services. So they're okay. That helps a little bit. What about interior designers? What are they charging hourly or are they doing fixed rates as well?
So again, in terms of the architects, it's very similar with interior designers. To be fair, this staging of like 1 to 7, stage 1 to 7 is basically what's the rebus stages of building of architectural design work. And every trade usually, or you like interior designers or M&E designers, whoever is a designer within the team, they usually try to stick to it because it's widely understandable if you say we're on stage three, meaning we're doing design development, but we're not yet ready for the full tender, so we
Oh, there
don't have
so
it finalized.
Are they billing then on like a percent of completion, or are they billing monthly? So let's just say phase 1 takes 2 months. Are they billing 50% at the start and 50% at the end? Or
It depends
okay.
on the company. So you'll have people doing that. You'll have people breaking down the fee monthly. It varies in terms of how
And
they want to be paid.
that's very different.
Within that, they usually say within, let's say, stage three, just for the sake of an example. So at stage three, they're going to they're going to do the design development, which means they're going to include full general arrangements, all of the elevations, all the bathroom elevations, exterior works, interior works, basic specifications, schedule of sanitary ware, kitchen, whatever it might be, ironmongery, doors, windows, everything. And and the price allows for 2 revisions, meaning that the client can come back up to 2 times with their comments.
I mean,
And
there's a part of that I like. Most clients would appreciate a fixed price. I just don't know how you do it fixed because I guess they're saying what the scope is and they're saying, but what's interesting about that, let's say one is a 10,000 square foot house and one is a 2,000 square foot house. Like obviously that rate is going to be a lot different, but I guess you're comparing it. So each architect would then come down in their fees to accommodate that. They're estimating their time. So they're taking the risk, which I understand like essentially there's really 2 models, right? There's fixed bid and then there's cost plus. And I've just been educated that if you do a fixed bid, regardless of who you are, you as the professional, whether you're the architect, designer, consultant, or builder, are taking some amount of risk because and so you have to capture that risk. The benefit to the client is they know exactly what they're going to pay and their list of services. The professional is taking the risk. If it goes up, they're eating that out of their pocket. If it goes down, they make more margin. I think it's a little bit like insurance. I don't know what insurance models you guys use over there, but like a high and low deductible. So one of my questions I ask when I meet with clients, because I'll do either contract, but I'll only do a fixed bid if architecture is 100% done, interior design is 100% done, because I can't effectively tell you what it's going to cost if you can't tell me what's included. Because how could anybody do that? You can't go to a car manufacturer and say, I want a car with 4 wheels. What's the cost? It could be anything.
we do quite a lot of that pre getting contractors involved. The scope we do to give them that certainty is quite high. In terms of the architecture fees, of course, they've got like their hourly rates and however much they will charge for, I don't know, site visits, etc., on top of the fixed fee if we go beyond the scope agreed. It tends to be on a fixed fee basis, and then any add-ons are a variation. It's
How
detailed written, so it's down for the client to decide. And then that first stage, which is the brief, that somewhat would decide whether the architect is the right person for you, whether it gives them quite a lot of insight in terms of where they need to be price wise with their services. Because you know that if somebody's asking you to do planning drawings, which means it's going to be up to stage 4, for a kitchen extension somewhere down in zone 2 or 3, the cost of this project is not going to be multiple millions of pounds. It's probably going to be two max at the very top. So it guides the architects as well, unless
Yeah.
they're first day on the job and they just set up a company last week.
You had mentioned before we started recording, right before when we first introduced ourselves, was the UK is obviously, at least from what I think, you can tell me if it's true, is a very transient area. A lot of people move there, they're coming through. What percentage of your clients are English? How many of them would be American? How many would be from Europe or Chinese or other parts of the world? Or because I could see in particular, if you're building, or let's say your job takes you there, and maybe you're not even like, how many of your clients are even actually living in England that you're working with?
London is a very specific place in England. I would say we can probably count on fingers of one hand in terms of the actual origin British people living within London. Usually it's some form of mix of cultures and stuff. It's like me. I've been here 15 years, so I don't think I can claim my original nationality anymore. I've never really lived my adult life down there. So it's, am I British? Am I not? But generally, there's a lot of Americans. There's a very big community of Americans down in West London. It's like those areas are very known, but probably since the beginning of the year as well, we've seen like a quite a big influx of Americans coming over. I hang out with estate agents quite a bit, and we hear a lot from them in terms of there's more and more properties required and purchased by the Americans. I also think you're always surprised by the margins of the actual purchase sale that we have here in comparison to US.
I'm
But
sorry, I'm not sure. What do you mean by that?
in the States, you've got an estate agent on the buying side and on the
Oh, yeah,
selling
a real
side.
estate agent. Correct. Yep.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
the average is between 5 and 6% for both of
In,
them.
in here, the average is between 1 and 3, and we don't
Whoa.
really have a buying one. No, nobody. I mean, nobody. That people not don't tend to have a buying agent on their side. It's usually just the seller
Selling.
who's
Do you know how long it's been at, like, that rate?
always
I mean,
like last 15 years for sure.
wow, this is gonna catch fire. Well, yeah, minute 35, you're about to set the US on real estate market on fire because that is not normal here at all. Why do you think that is?
I don't. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think from a very high level, especially within London, properties are extremely expensive here. A typical 4 or 5 bedroom townhouse somewhere in zone 5, it's probably going to cost you about a minimum of 10 million.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot. So yeah, at 1%, you've got $100,000 real estate commission for the selling agent. But even there, the homes here, typically there's some negotiation I've seen, but and they don't obviously publicly disclose it. But I've been a part of a few bigger ones, and usually that rate comes down a little bit. But I've never really, yeah. Anyway, everything's negotiable in real estate agents. But and there's been a huge law change here recently in the U.S. There's a big lawsuit against just the real estate community in general in terms of being open and financially disclose things. And so you don't have to pay somebody, but it's still so ingrained in like how we buy and sell properties that even though the law dictates something else, the practice is something totally different. And obviously those that have power, those that have a higher margin don't want to have that decreased. It's going to take quite a while culturally before that to change as well. That's wow, that's really interesting. Is that similar in continental Europe? Would that be similar as well?
I'm not too sure on the percentages, but what I know for sure is the process is very different. Like down here, you have to have a lawyer or at least somebody representing you to change the ownership in the land registry. You have to have it. You can't avoid this cost. Whereas
So
in Central Europe, you can do it on your own. It might be a cultural thing, but it's something common, right? In here,
yes.
it's very rare. And I'd say again, it's mainly being driven by those cultures who are used to having somebody represent them. But I've been in a couple of meetings as well where somebody purchases a property down in London. They've been in London maybe 3 times, if ever, and they're just purchasing a property because they need a family member to stay over for a summer or something, and it happens. They still have somebody else on the ground, boots on the ground, looking around for the
Yep.
property for them. But then coming back to the construction element as well, You have a very interesting license structure in terms of, in order to be a builder, you need to have a license. You need to prove that you're actually competent in what you're doing. We don't have that system. I can register tomorrow a construction company, and there you go. As long as I find clients, I'm trading.
I know in Minnesota you need a license, but it's not like it's super rigorous. I think it's, I don't remember now. It's been 21 years. Maybe it's changed, but and I think the bar is pretty low. Honestly, I think the bar is pretty low for a lot of services. Real estate license to get your to be a real estate agent, a couple days and you've got your license. Just because you have a license doesn't mean you're awesome either. It just means you have. It's like having a driver's license. Just because you have a driver's license doesn't make you a good driver. It's not like you're a Formula One race car driver. You have the state says you are allowed to drive. This doesn't make you good. And so I think at least when you have a license, the state or the government or whoever the governing body is of the licenses have some recourse to either put your license in jeopardy if you do bad work, or obviously if you like we have obviously building codes. I assume you'd have building codes there too. You're talking about structural stuff. So each city, each state has different codes. Minnesota, we're in the northern climate, so it's cold. We have high humidity in the summer and it's minus 25. And so there are certain different parts of the climate that obviously you have to build differently just because your climate dictates it. And sometimes the state will have certain performance guidelines. So anyway, that's
No, but we're the same. And to be fair, I mean, there's those big plans in terms of sustainability and green homes and net zero in terms of UK. That's like a big subject in the last couple of years or so. But yeah, in terms of the delivery of those, especially that we have so many old buildings and listed buildings and conservation places, it's very hard to deliver within existing architecture. Even the
I think the clients that are now, I think the people that are in their mid 20s to 35, I think they're going to be asking more questions because they've heard the green message and the energy conservation message at that point for a couple decades. I think I have two clientele. One clientele is like 55 plus, they're empty nesters, their kids are gone to high school or college, and they're certainly aware of it, but unless they're passionate about it, like they're not going to spend money on it. Why would they? They might build a smaller home that's well appointed, which does fit in the ethos of less is more, but they're not going to invest in solar and geothermal and some of these other technologies. And then the younger generation, I don't know. We'll see and check back in 10 years. We'll see if I'm right about this, because right now my clients haven't been willing to pay for it, even as much as the message is out there. And the clientele in London, are they willing to pay for that type of home, or is it being mandated by the city or the government?
So the actual new build properties, it's mandated. So they have to fit certain criteria
Like
in order to
what for, like how far are they going? Like give me some examples. What do they have to do?
there's loads of requirements. Again, the project I'm working on now, we're not allowed to have a gas in the properties. It all needs to be electric powered, so it's clean.
What happens
We
when the power goes out?
They've got solar panels on the roofs as well, so that's one of the sources. There's a lot of like material debates in terms of the choice of insulations and actual brickwork, the materials that go into the buildings as well, in terms of like how sustainable they are. Carbon footprint is being counted left, right, and center. Even contractors have to put together reports in terms of their carbon neutral aspirations and how do we achieve that within a certain development and stuff. But it's very hard to regulate that or require any of that within existing properties. And
Yeah.
my experience is the exact opposite of what you just said. So usually the empty nesters are like people 55 plus, they would like to have that self-sufficient, self-contained home that's somewhat sustainable, that they don't really have to spend a lot of money on heating or cooling it in the summer, but they still want it to look somewhat modern, and they can actually go a bit crazy in terms of the money they will spend, because like you said, the kids are already in college. Luckily for us, we've got colleges free. The education down here is mainly free. Yeah, that's part of the cost that people can. Higher education is probably paid for, but it's still nothing in comparison to the US costs. I think last time I checked, I think the base undergrad degree was within a region of 6 to 10 grand. I think yours are much higher.
Oh yeah, we're a lot higher. That'd be like per semester. So you're saying they could go through 4 years of college for 6 to 10 grand?
Yeah, I've
Wow.
done my master's degree in construction project management, and that cost me 8 grand.
It's been a long time since I've been in school, but I see it all the time. I think when you're at state universities, it's less, but this is going to be a whole nother podcast if we go down the road of, if we tackle, although that would be interesting, the Curious Builder tackles healthcare and higher education with Julia, but we'll stay on construction since I know that better anyway. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. If you're still chasing checks and juggling spreadsheets, it's time to upgrade. Adaptive is revolutionizing how builders get paid with AI-powered bill pay, automated draws, one-click payments, and built-in lien waivers. Faster payments, fewer headaches, and total visibility. Adaptive takes care of the back-end chaos so you can focus on what you do best, building. We've used Adaptive for 2.5 years and trust them to keep our projects moving and payments flowing. Learn more at adaptive.build and simplify the pay process today. For more information, you can also listen to episode 10 and episode 15. So the project hits a standstill. There's cost overruns. Are they Googling you? Are they word of mouth? Are the architects or builders or people working on the quality costs saying, hey, you need to reach out to Julia, she can help bring us home? Or how are you getting introduced to your clients?
So there is essentially that stage 4 that we were talking about earlier. It's called tender. So that's when we get the builders involved, usually, or we're trying to find the best builder. And because we don't really have the licensing system in any way, shape, or form, we're the ones that have to do all of the background checks. So what tends to happen is, whether it's the architects, interior designers, whoever, usually it's the person that was first on the project. They usually say, we need somebody to help us find a builder that's going to drive us through this whole mess. And then usually that's when
I like
that's
how I like that timeout. Like the first thing you're saying is, we need a builder to help us with this mess. We know it's going to be a mess. Who's going to help us clean it up? I like talk about setting it up for expectations.
I'm yet to experience a project with a private client that goes exactly as expected from day one to completion. I've never experienced that in my life. My best projects, we had target dates and we had the target budget. We hit the target within a 50p mark. I'm proud to say we still hit the budget, but I think we were like 3 months delayed and stuff, and there was a lot of changes as well in the process. The project where I had the most changes that I've probably seen in my life, we had 327 variations.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's
Going back to the earlier thing about fixed bid and who's taking the risk versus cost plus, again, the more detailed you go down the road in terms of architecture and interior design selections, the more accurate you're going to get on pricing. And people often ask, what should I use for a variance number? And when we're all done, if we design it, have everything completely fleshed out, priced out, I always tell my clients, if we can wait a few more months on the front end with designing, it'll go faster on the back end. It'll also be more accurate. So the question is, do you want to go fast and build on the fly? Which I don't know why this is such a common thing and why building is subject to this. A lot of people want to do that. They think that faster is better. It's not better unless you're willing to have an open checkbook and to understand that you're taking on some risk, because the builder can't tell you what it's going to be because it hasn't been specced out yet. And there's ways to do allowances. Hey, 90% of it's selected, 10% of it you put in placeholders. That's fine. Clients don't remember, 8 months or a year into the project, that the builder maybe offered them a chance early on to make more selections. All they remember is, man, I don't like all these change orders. Man, I don't like how expensive this is. And man, this is taking longer. Guess what? And again, it doesn't do me any good to tell the client, like, I told you, because that's not going to help you. And so I think a lot of it, at least where I am and the points of these podcasts, is like, the more we can educate the client on the front end of what they're going to experience, the better we can give them advice. Honestly, it's no different than being a doctor. For a successful outcome, this is what we'd recommend. You're still the client. You still have to decide what outcome you want. And a patient, like surgery, you can get your knee replaced, but if they're not willing to do the physical therapy, I don't care how good the surgeon is, your knee's not going to operate. And so it does need, we don't oftentimes talk about how, I guess we probably should, is how important the client and managing expectations. That's a big part of your job, obviously, is managing their expectations for all parties. And that's why I think we use a lot of the same architects, same designers, so we get really familiar with each other. And I think it breeds more continuity and a better chemistry for the client's experience. And you mentioned before, do these architects and designers not have go-to builders? Are you always starting from scratch trying to
It
find a
it varies. To be fair, I tend to say it depends on the project, because a builder or a contractor who's been very good for one job, it might not be the great choice for a different one. I've got a client now who she's done her own home. It's a lovely terraced property down in Kensington, which is one of the precious areas in London. It's very Georgian, Victorian era. It's very traditional, and her interiors are kind of luxury but match the actual theme of the building. And it's lovely. I think it cost her somewhere about 1.5, 1.6 million altogether. And she had a great team. She had a great experience overall, brilliant. But now, for whatever the reasons, she's trying to build a wellness center in a completely different part of England, which is in London. And she's saying these guys were so great and they're willing to travel. And I really think that we should utilize them, etc. Every single conversation I have with a client, it always starts with, in construction, we have three variables, right? There's time, money, and quality. Pick two.
Yeah. Hey, that's true. I've heard that many times here. That's good to know. That's a universal world truth. That is not that crosses boundaries for sure, or barriers and territorial lines for sure.
Exactly. So when they pick two that are the most important for them, then we can take it from there.
Yeah.
But the project she's trying to build is going to be over 10 million value. So at this point, trying to put a contractor who's very comfortable doing jobs between one and two, it's a great opportunity for them, but it's also a big risk, right? Because there's so many things that can go wrong there. And I'd say it's somewhat unreasonable. There's this assessment process where we pick different contractors that we think could be suitable for the job. We ask them to fill in a questionnaire in terms of how they see themselves within that project environment, what they think they can bring to the table. And at that point, you decide which way you want to go, which contractor you want to price the job, etc. But I'd say we don't really have cost plus as the most popular way of going, to be fair. And I'd say because people want to have that cost financial certainty at the start, and we either go the traditional contracting, which is going to be a fixed price for whatever the service is, and then the client takes the risk of any changes, unforeseeable variations, etc. Or we go the design and build route, and then depending how do we define that design element. So in here it tends to be we've got an architect, interior designer, bring the project back to stage 4, which is going to be ready for tender, and then the contractor would be responsible for doing all of the detailed design.
Now I looked at your website, you list your services, but once you get past that initial, I think you have that set fees at different milestones, but then they basically keep you on a monthly retainer. Is that accurate?
Correct,
Yeah.
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 I don't really believe in a percentage fee for a very specific reason, that I always try to deliver the best value for the best price to my clients. So if I was trying to reduce the costs for them, I would be knocking my own fee.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, in that sense, I prefer to go on a fixed fee basis. But yeah, it's a conversation for a whole another episode of how people price here and how people
Yeah.
price the US.
How many projects will you take on at one time?
So we tend to have two, sometimes three contractors that we work with on that wing of the contractors side where we support them. And then usually it's up to three projects that we do on the client side as well. But the sizes of those projects vary. It all depends on what's the stage of the job, where we are, where
Right.
how much input is needed, etc.
And how big is your team?
So at the moment, there's me and there is two Annas. One Anna is doing a lot of my cost analysis and dealing with all of the data and finances. And the other Anna, I believe she spoke to you.
Yeah.
She's doing all of my initial admin. She does a lot of email, dealing with emails, invoicing. She's project managing me basically to make
Yeah,
sure
yeah. That's
I deliver what I have to deliver. And then we've got Suze, who's sleeping down here in the corner below. She's our head of happiness. And in the longer term, there's a potential for one more person that I'd like on the team, but we're always going to be that boutique small
Yeah.
size.
Yeah. What is the economic climate over there right now? There's been a lot of turmoil in the last, I'd say, obviously year, but man, the last 4 months have been wild here, which I assume what's the state of building and what are you seeing? Obviously, the financial markets are being roiled quite a bit. What's the attitude of people that are remodeling and looking to do things right now?
There's been a very slow start to this year. Usually at this point, there's a lot of projects starting and ongoing and somewhat being tendered or priced up. This year, it's been going very, very slowly. But at the same time, a lot of people I speak to, it feels like the clients are waiting for something. There's a lot of projects ready to go, but people are waiting to press that final button and put the money into the account and be like, let's go. But at the same time, there's still enough in terms of development work going on. There's still a lot of work that is happening. It's just, I think, specifically for private clients, there's a lot of unknown happening around the world at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. What percentage of your clients are paying cash for their builds versus financing it?
I'd say probably 90% they either pay from their own equity and
Yeah.
cash, or it's the bank and of mum and dad paying.
Yeah, the
Um,
big mom and dad. Yeah, I would say the same. Most of our clientele, and I can't tell if that's just at the higher end. It's been that way for me for about 5 or 6 years. So even when interest rates were low, that was still the case. Our higher income projects were still being paid cash. I was just curious what the appetite for financing is over there.
yeah, a lot. I don't really work on many projects where finance is required because, like I said, I tend to work with those jobs 1 to 2 million and stuff. And people who have that type of money, they usually have it. They're ready to go. They're ready to just put the money in and go with it. It's
Mhm.
mainly, I think, from my experience, please, it's those projects 5 million plus, 10 million and plus, where people will pay some sort of from their own equity, and then a percentage would be paid by the bank because not many people keep 10 million in their current account.
Right, yeah. It's in the jar in the garden shed. Do you have a lot of competition? I mean, is your positioning and, like, how you position your business, is it common over there, or is it kind of unique?
So, in the way that my profession as a profession isn't nothing unknown here, it's quite common to have people do that kind of gatekeeping between the clients and the contractors and the design team and whoever else not. But I don't really look at it as competition because I'm very aware that I have a very specific way of going about things and not everybody likes that. And I'm also very highly driven by what is the project. Like, there's a lot of projects I don't take, not because I'm picky and choosy or I think more about myself, but it's I don't think those projects need me. There are people who are much better geared up for certain things. Or if somebody's doing commercial work, I work with a girl who's absolutely amazing and we get along really well. So I'll just say she's better for the job. She's done it multiple times. I don't know a lot of the things in terms of commercial building regs. There's a lot of processes that differ. Speak to somebody else who's better geared up for it. But I find it that it's a competition only on a certain level because we have here either freelancers who are one man band people working per hour, etc. Or we have a lot of these massive consultancies having 20, 30, 50 people and being around for donkey's years. There's not many like in betweens. And that's why I want to keep my company that very personal and boutique style.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I wanna respect your time and for the listeners as well. Thank you very much for reaching out. Tell Anna, I think appreciate her, although I thought her name was Hello because that was her email title. Just met I think my Anna is named Leah, and her email's marketing at. It's always funny when you have to introduce them that way. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. We'll have everything in the show notes, and, yeah, we'll stay in touch, and if I ever make it over to England, I'll look you up for a cup of tea.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun
Very
to talk to you.
We've had the podcast now for 2.5, almost 3 years now. And we have a consulting page, one-to-one consulting. You can book my time for 1 hour. Perhaps you've heard a guest where you like one of the topics. Maybe you want an introduction to some of the guests that I've had on. Perhaps you want to talk about branding or marketing or anything that we've covered on the podcast over the last 2.5 years. You can book a time at curiousbuilderpodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder Podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.